Welcome to the webinar, Nature-Based Solutions in Displacement Settings. This is the opening webinar of the Learning Days and annual event of the Swiss NGO DRR platform. And as a first note, for those of you who would like to listen to this webinar in French, please go to the globe signal at the bottom of the Zoom and choose the language French. And then you will hear the simultaneous translation in French. And then I will quickly go through some housekeeping rules for the webinar. So please keep your microphone closed if you are not speaking. And if your internet allows it, turn your camera on. And you are very welcome to ask questions anytime in the chat. And also as a note, this session is being recorded and it will be made available at the YouTube channel of the DRR platform. And let's get to our agenda and speakers. So firstly, I would like to introduce our hosts. So this webinar will be hosted by Arabella Filippona from HEX-EPER and myself. I am Maria Claudelin from Caritas Switzerland. And in this webinar, we will discuss the key considerations for designing effective and sustainable nature-based solutions. Most importantly, going through some concrete project examples to reflect what works as best and where in which conditions. And we will also take into account donor perspectives and financing opportunities for nature-based solutions in displacement settings. And on the agenda, we will have 4 presentations. We will start with a short introduction to why are nature-based solutions needed in displacement context by Arabella. And then we will hear from Esanul Hogg, who is the environmental management expert at UNHCR. And he will present sustainable land management and planning for disaster risk reduction for refugees. And then we will move on to a presentation by Urs Plös, who is director at Adansonia Consulting, and he is also a member of the Swiss Humanitarian Aid Expert Group Disaster Risk Reduction and Environment. And he will be presenting an ecosystem restoration with assisted natural regeneration case study in Chad. And our presentations will end with Daniel Opito, who is a program manager at HEX-EPER Uganda. And he will present as a tree planting project in Uganda that will contribute to environmental restoration. And we would also like to warmly welcome our panelist Ali Neumann, who is the head of expert group DRR Environment at the Swiss Humanitarian Aid. And he will be joining us and all of the other panelists at the discussion round. And from all of you listeners, we would very much like you to also write in the chat your name, organization, and what is your experience with nature-based solutions. And as said, you're welcome to ask questions anytime in the chat. So let's start with our first presentation. Arabella, please.
Thank you a lot, Maria, and a warm welcome to everybody also from my side. We'll start with a brief introduction to the topic. Why are nature-based solutions relevant in displacement settings? And there's a very interesting and recent study by the Red Cross Climate Center that analyzed the exposure of refugees and IDPs in over 20 countries, looking at camps and informal settlements, primarily in the global south. And the study found that 9 out of 10 refugees and IDPs in these contexts are highly exposed to at least 2 climate-related hazards. Risk of extreme heat is the most significant hazard, with 86% exposed to it, and over 50% are exposed to both flood and heat stress, with many also exposed to fires, cyclones, and drought. So what does that tell us? We really get a clear picture that refugees and IDPs in the global south face a high risk of experiencing climate and disaster events, and are very likely also to experience severe impacts if these events arise. And probably, yeah, we can assume that there are limited adaptive capacities in these contexts. Next slide, please. Before we dive into the topic, we probably quickly have to look at the definition of nature-based solutions. And there are several definitions out there, and please join our webinar in the afternoon, where you will get a really in-depth overview of how NBS are understood. As the DR platform, CEST NGO DR platform, we refer to the definition of the United Nations Environment Assembly, which defines NBS as actions to protect, conserve, restore, and sustainably use and manage different types of ecosystems. So that can mean forest protection. That can also mean landscape restoration through tree planting, or the protection of rangelands, or the protection of wetlands. But as it also says, modified ecosystems, this includes also, for example, urban areas where greening measures are taken, or also hybrid solutions are included, where nature and built infrastructure is combined. And NBS, nature-based solutions, address the social and environmental challenges that mean, for example, climate change. And we also read in that definition that they simultaneously should provide human well-being, ecosystem services, resilience, and biodiversity benefits. So the definition is, it includes a lot of ecosystem-based adaptation approaches, as we see here. And you may wonder, great, but what does this mean now for the displacement context? Next slide, please. And to make it a little bit more tangible for you, we put together a few examples. And what we like to present here are really just snapshots. So nature-based solutions in displacement settings could mean to have green corridors in a camp settlement. It could be a belt of trees, vegetation, so that heat stress is reduced. Or it could mean terracing and slope stabilization through some bioengineering measures, which is a combination of living plants and natural materials with gabion structures, for example, so that the risk of landslides, erosion, and runoff is reduced. It could also be some retention ponds where you would like to store water and buffer against fire. It could also mean some farming, agroforestry activities within a campsite, that would also have the co-benefit of food security. NBS could also be some green building solutions like green roofs or green facades of shelters that have the co-benefit of reducing heat stress. And it could also mean intervention on a landscape scale around a refugee settlement, like a holistic watershed protection and restoration approach, where you look at sustainable land and water management interventions beyond really the settlement boundaries. So you see, all of these interventions could be called nature-based solutions in displacement settings. And if you go to the next slide, there are, what we've seen before, just many opportunities when it comes to NBS in displacement settings, such as clearly the reduced risks and impacts from disasters, strengthened resilience for refugees or IDPs, and multiple co-benefits like the improved strengthened food security, for example. And likely they come as a low-cost intervention compared to big infrastructure measures. And they also may have the potential to foster joint engagement between host and displaced communities. However, and that's why we came up with the topic with these topics for today's webinar, there are, of course, also many challenges. And these we would like to discuss today further than with our speakers and panelists. Because if we look at the humanitarian context, we have all these constraints regarding the timescales, for example. Nature-based solutions may take multiple years to reach their maturity. And so how long might this refugee settlement be on that side? But even if we know it's a long-term settlement, how there are likely many urgent needs to be met. So what would be the priority in that case? And if we look at the scale, if we have to look at the whole landscape scale, there are questions then in terms of governance and how do we address these? And strongly linked to the first point, of course, the question of funding. We are all very aware of the current funding situation. So how can we make the case for NBS in humanitarian contexts when the basic needs can hardly be met? And we'd also like to discuss today, how can we make sure that the intervention or the implementation of NBS is also met with sufficient safeguards so that we can make sure that our interventions are not causing trade-offs, but are inclusive, gender sensitive, and environmentally sound. So this was the introduction to the topic, and now I'm handing over back to Maria for the presentations.
Yeah, thank you very much, Arabella, for setting the scene for our webinar. I think it's going to be very interesting presentations and discussions. Now I would like to hand over to Esanul for the next presentation. Esanul, please.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Arabella, for the nice introduction and setting the tone. So good afternoon to all the participants from Bangladesh. And for some of you, it may be good morning. So my name is Mohammad Ehsanul Haq. I work with UNHCR in Bangladesh, Cox's Bazar. And as Arabella shared about that, sustainable land restoration is also one approach of nature-based solution. So I would like to share our experience here in the congested refugee camp in Bangladesh. And here we try to implement a set of nature-based solutions like slope stabilization, increased water flow, reduce flood, and there are a few co-benefits as well. So as Arabella shared the typologies, and I believe me and my co-presenters, we are here to present some of the demonstration and our experience here. Next, please. Thank you. So the whole project is actually part of the macro settlement plan. There are three important layers of the macro settlement vision, which is a blue-green network connecting all the green dots, green space, and also restoring the water body, and then infrastructural corridors and also land use. So this actually also interplays between, like for access, blue-green network also provides access. So SULMAR, Sustainable Land Management and Environmental Rehabilitation, is one such demonstration in a small catchment in between Camp 1W and 2W. Next, please. Yeah, so with the objective of reducing disaster risks in a highly congested area, as on the left-hand side of the screen, as you can see, this is the catchment of the project. Where just for easier understanding, all the water drained through a single drainage point, and we purposely identified these sites so that from project control, project management point of view, it would be easier for us, and also other challenges as well. And we tried to follow nature-based solution approach, like for the rehabilitation of the waterways, we tried to develop riparian vegetation, and also we tried to include, space efficiency, and we tried to integrate the age, gender, and diversity approach in the whole project planning and implementation. And community engagement, we tried to ensure from the very beginning while we assessed the problem, designed the project, and also in monitoring and evaluation. Next, please. Now it is about the result, and also, what are the challenges related to displacement setting that we faced and how we addressed that. And in the next slide, I will be talking about lesson learned. So what we learned that within a displacement setting, there are many variables which are dynamic, and it interplays between one another. So often it is really challenging. Like for our case, it was that, for meeting the refugees' fuel demand, forest clearance happened, and then that again, contributed to downstream flooding, accelerated soil erosion, and all those. Then again, the whole camp setting is within a climate hotspot, Cox's Bazar, and that, worked as risk multiplier. And then there are policy limitations as well, like for refugees in Bangladesh, they do not have access to livelihood, and also they do not have, freedom of movement. They are in camp situation. And then in terms of results so far, let me draw your attention to this paired picture of the same site. As you can see, it was, the stream was already clogged, and there was some pocket of waterlogged situation. And when we designed the project engaging the community, and they emphasized on access, we established walkway on the two banks, which also demarcated a boundary so that encroachment, we stopped encroachment. And then for the mosquito breeding ground or the waterlogged condition, that we raised, elevated, and for children, we created some use, and they are using that as a playground. From the flood point of view, since the water retention capacity increased, now flood has been reduced. And then we used plantation, though it is a highly congested area. We learned that several times plantation, we did, but survival rate was poor. Later, we engaged community more, and especially children, when they had different use, or what should I say, kind of different scope of using their time. And also with the learning center, we tried to develop masses with the education sector so that, I mean, they also understand the importance of plants. And then mobility also increased, which also helped to respond to disasters like for fire, which is a risk for the refugees in such congested area. But now with increased access, I mean, people from this site, they could be covered with at least 3 different approaches of fire extinguishing, which is, I mean, handheld water pump, then also not with the mobile firefighting unit because that still needs some width, but fire extinguishing material is also now available. And then on over the stream top, they can now do cultivate vegetable, and which is meeting at least demand for some of the families who are living nearby to the stream. And it is also contributing to the groundwater. And next, please. So from the lesson learned point of view, and what we experienced, that when a site plan is developed, engaging the community, that also need to be, I mean, need to be reflected in the activity. From our case, we have found that when a space was vacant and it was delayed due to some policy limitations about the next use, but then some unauthorized shelter was, was established very quickly, which was not the intention of the project. So it was really difficult for us. Then several times community engagement and messaging had to be done. Then from the age gender diversity lens, since we engaged them, that actually helped us. We had the chance to build rapport with the community very quickly when children were also engaged and they were also happy. And one lesson, which is that NBS is not the solution for all types of problems. So here, like for slope stabilization, some of the slope which are so steep, we also used, gray infrastructure. And when is the best time to start NBS in a humanitarian setting? Well, for us, we identified some no regret solutions, which is like plantation. And also, for the whole stream, it was difficult to start the work from one single point. There was some resistance as well, but that did not stop us. What was the easiest part? We started with that. And when some benefit are already visible, then it was really easier for us. And cash for work volunteers, which also helped us. From this project, we had the chance to engage over 8,000 percentage of cash for work volunteers. So in such situation where refugees do not have access to livelihood, that actually helped them, and that also helped us to engage the community more. So let me stop here. I believe my other co-presenters will be sharing more. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Esanol, for your very interesting presentation, and especially I like the concrete measures you took very much. So now we will get to our presentation from Urs, please. Urs, you seem to be muted.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, good morning to everybody. So I will present you a pilot study we did with SDC UNHCR in Sudanese refugee camps. And I think, as you know, the first Sudanese refugee camp refugees, they came in 2000, end of 2004 in Chad, and still now there are several hundred thousand refugees in Chad, and even recently there were much more refugee coming in. So I will talk with you about the key findings of these projects. Next slide, please. I think to understand the impact on the environmental degradation of the ecosystems around the Sudanese refugee camps, there are about 10 refugee camps, we have to acknowledge that the ecosystems they were already under stress before the arrival of the refugees. And so the refugees, they brought an additional stress to these fragile ecosystems in the Sahel, because they need water, of course, as you know, and they need pasture for their cattle. They need land for cropping, and of course, they need also firewood for meeting their energy needs. And what is important to understand is that so they share the natural resources together. They are competing on the same natural resources with the local communities. And of course, by this, there is a high conflict potential between both communities, host and displaced communities. Next. For our approach, what we did first a feasibility study. And in this feasibility study, we especially were looking to identify areas or selected area in the refugee camps where the locals or the displaced people have already engaged some activities, environmental activities. Because we did this because we wanted to avoid to start I don't know, a large sensibilization program to win the people to participate. We wanted to work where there was already a commitment, where there was already a motivation to do some environmental activities. And also what was for us very clear is we need to offer some income generating activities to win the participation for the displaced communities and the local communities. I think only by this we can really also ensure that there is an interest for larger environmental conservation. And what is maybe new in this restoration, we were not planting trees. We were rather using the nature-based, the natural regeneration potential which was there in these Sahelian ecosystems. And so the potential is lying on the resprouting shoots from the stumps which has been cut, from suckers, from roots, and also dormant seeds in the soil. And we were convinced that this methodology could be a cheap alternative to traditional tree planting. This was also because we made it before we started with this pilot project. We made also an evaluation of the community tree plantation, which have been done in Chad, also by UNHCR and elsewhere in the Sahel. And most of, I said, community tree plantation, they failed. This was quite opposite to individual tree plantations which were made in the campsites, in the homesteads, which got quite a good success. And another important approach for the pilot project was that it has to be really inclusive and participatory, in the sense that the locals and the refugees were working together in mixed groups. And of course, also considering gender balance to be sure that the women are participating actively in these initiatives. What was I think what was a strength in the Chadian case was the existence of this convention locale, this this land use agreement plans, because this gave the possibility that all stakeholders could participate and could agree, could have a common agree on the land they want to use. And it was also there, it was very important that the semi-nomadic herders were participating in these initiatives. And another approach, which was also key, was that we tried to really apply the nexus, the humanitarian development and peace principles from the very beginning on of these initiatives. Next. This is just to illustrate the success we had in these 2 years. The local communities, together with the refugees, they managed to protect an area of about 1,000 hectares of Acacia Senegal. Acacia Senegal is a gum acacia. I will show you later on a picture. And what was very important was to protect this natural regeneration from browsing goats and dromedaries. And we were not using any enclosures because that would be too big and it would be also too expensive. So there was a very little project support for doing this. And I just give you the figure, a comparison if we would have done this with traditional tree plantation to reforest an area of 1,000 hectares would be more or less $1 million. Next, please. And this you see, it's the same site. So you see it on the left side at the beginning when we started. You see the trees were very, very small because they were regularly browsed by dromedaries and goats. And once they were protected, 2 years later, it was amazing to see that these small seedlings were more than 2 meter height. And the idea was not to protect this area forever. The idea was to protect it as long as the acacia trees are not high enough to be browsed by the dromedaries. So once they had a height of 4 to 5 meters, there is no more protection necessary. Next. This is just to illustrate gum arabic. It's from Acacia Senegal. You see it on the right side. So it is a very valuable forest product. Next. And at the end, I will give you some lessons learned. So I think what I said already, you know, when I started, you know, I think it was very important that our pilot areas that we were working where the people had already a commitment or a motivation for protecting the environment. And secondly, I also repeat it, I think it was very key to attract the local communities by income generating activities here. It is on gum arabic, and by this to encourage beneficiaries to protect the environment. Very important was certainly also the creation of mixed groups of locals and refugees, because they were working together. They were using the natural resources together, and also by this, you know, when there were conflicts, you know, were also mediation committees when they could sort out their conflicts. And again, also I mentioned convention locale, and I think this was really, you know, gave us a framework, you know, of the governance to clarify the roles of the different stakeholders participating in the kind of land management plan. And then this convention locale, they were also approved by the local authorities. And I think also is probably also a very important point is also when you are doing this kind of operation, which is quite new, was quite new for almost everybody. You need also a commitment, and you need motivated staff from the participating organizations. So in this case, it was of course SDC, UNHCR, but also all the NGOs who were participating, the national NGO, but also very important, the minister, the national ministry. The challenges we had was certainly, it was a very quite complex, because there were actors, there were humanitarian actors, there were development actors, there were also actors from the peace side, and so the coordination to bring all these stakeholders on the same hat to have a good coordination, and especially also to ensure a regular information of all actors, that was a challenge. What is probably also one of the challenges was also there were many also foresters which were not believing too much in this approach, because they said, Sahel is too dry. You know, you have there's very little resilience of this fragile ecosystem. So we had also to show them, you know, in the field, to convince them that it is a possibility. And I think also the potential is also in the UN decade on ecosystem restoration is certainly also natural regeneration could have a stronger place. Another challenge was the frequent staff turnover of key persons. I think this is unfortunate, but it was the case, because it needed also, we lost some of the good people. For example, one guy from UNHCR, he left the organization, so we had to explain, we have to train again the people on assisted natural regeneration. And maybe the last challenge is certainly also due to the war, the market chain of gum arabic, especially also with Sudan, because most of the gum arabic is going to Sudan. It has to be revived and to improve. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Urs, for your interesting presentation. There are actually two questions from the audience to you. I would like to ask them to you very quickly before we move on to the next presentation, just to keep in time. The first question is the reasons of the failure of the community tree plantations in Chad and elsewhere in Sahel. Why did some of the tree plantations fail in there? And then there's another question, if it would have costed $1 million to reforest that 1,000 hectares, then how much did the alternative regeneration cost? If you can quickly reply to those before we move on.
Yes, I think you know, the problem with tree plantation is planting a tree. I'm a forester, you know, planting a tree even in the Sahel is not that a problem, but maintaining the trees is in many countries is a huge problem. You know, if you don't protect the tree plantation against the goats, for example, browsing goats, and this is everywhere in the tropics, you know, they will not grow up. And also, of course, it's in Chad, it is also the dromedaries which are browsing on the small seedlings. And in the Sahel also, tree plantation in the first year, you know, you have to water the seedlings to come up. And in areas where you have more vegetation, you have fire, which can destroy the tree plantation. So by saying this, don't plant a tree if you cannot ensure the maintenance of the tree. And that's why I mentioned, you know, if you have community plantation, then the question is, who will maintain the tree plantation, you know, within the community? And this is sometimes a problem. And in addition, also, you have governance problem, you know, who is the owner of the land? So that's why in Chad, in the camps, on the campsites, The trees usually were growing well because they have been protected in front, of the small houses of the refugees. And the second question is, can you repeat it? Is on the cost of the tree plantation or of the
the cost of the alternative natural regeneration.
So, we made just a small calculation together with the ministry. The ministry said usually, at that time when you are planting 1 hectare of trees is usually including everything, including also maintenance, is about $1,000, and roughly. And what we did for so the basic for our approach was the locals together with the refugees. They had to identify an area where they wanted to protect the small seedlings of Acacia Senegal, and to ensure their protection, they have to come up with a brigade, with people who are controlling the area. There were maybe about 10 people who were controlling the area, and so that the costs for for paying these people was a very little amount, and I think it was even they were even paid by the locals themselves, because they were convinced that it was a good operation, was a good initiatives, because they were hoping, to produce gum arabic later on.
Thank you very much, Urs. I see there are even more questions for you in the chat, but unfortunately we don't have time for them now because our next presentation is waiting. So if you want to, you can go in the chat and reply those questions in written. And now I would like to introduce Daniel, our last presentation, and we will stay in the topic of tree planting. And since gender balance has been mentioned already a few times in this webinar, we were hoping to have more women speakers, and actually this Uganda project was supposed to be presented by Daniel's colleague Debbie, who is unfortunately not able to join us. So now all of our panelists are men, but just to give an update on our efforts to keep the gender balance. But Daniel, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to take this time to welcome everyone on the call. I'm Daniel Peter. I work for XEPA as the program manager in Uganda, and I'm going to take her through the session of this presentation on environmental restoration through the tree planting initiative in Naki Valley settlement. Let's move to the next slide. Next slide, please. Uganda hosts more than 13 settlements within the country, and Naki Valley is one of them, where it hosts a total of 260,000. Go to slide 1, please. You're in the next slide. Yes, on the context. The settlement hosts more than 260,000 refugees, with the highest population coming from Democratic Republic of Congo due to the recent war in the Ituri province. The project started way back in 2023 in July, with the component looking at class-based intervention to the new arrivals in the settlement, with the livelihood component, doing shelter construction for the needy, the PSNs who have just come to the settlement, and the component on environment was looking at restoration of the degraded areas, and of course, with support from the community initiative leading to the tree planting. The project is being implemented by XEPA with support from OPM. OPM is charged with the coordination of activities of partners within the settlement. It's a government arm. And with our local partner, that is Department of Possibility, a local NGO which is based in settlement, in Nakivale refugee settlement. Next, please. Upon the project, we conducted the community engagement where we conducted a sensitivity survey using the NEET Plus tool. It's a Nexus environment assessment tool that was used to identify the problem together with the community. And one of the main problems that was spelled out clearly was lack of fuel. That's firewood for cooking, majorly for the households of refugees. And the other aspect was on environmental degradation as a result of the pressure that comes from the people coming into the settlement. So the areas around become at risk due to human action, looking for poles for construction, firewood, and the rest. In response to the problem, with the support from the community as we were engaging them, we were able to identify the tree species with the support from District Natural Resource Department on which tree to be planted and support the restoration. OPM, like I said, was in charge with the coordination, guided on the allocation of the land where some of these trees should be planted. And the approach that we use the community approach using the cast for work. The households who are around where we're supposed to plant the trees, they engage in the activities of pitting and planting, and money was paid to them. We also used the school environmental clubs where children from primary schools were engaged in the tree planting, and this approach helped us to cascade the planting and ownership of the trees at the household level. Next, please. Next slide. With what we've done, we're able to register some of the success. A total of 26,704 trees were planted, with 81% of the trees contributing to wood trees. And it was targeting institutions, schools, health centers. And this was done in a bid to secure the fuel energy for cooking at household level. But the main intention was to reduce on the illegal cutting of the nearby trees around the homestead or within the community. The indigenous tree species contributed 19%, where mangoes, jackfruits, guavas were planted at household level. And this one went to 800 households, refugees households. And this one was done in bid to provide alternatives for nutritional diversity, where it will provide also income to the household and strengthen the households. And next, please. The next slide. And with the intervention, we're able to see some of the impacts, and the early outcomes that we've seen is where we planted the trees, there were improved vegetation cover of the areas that we planted the trees. There was also strengthened community awareness on the management of the trees that are being planted at community level, the woodlots, and also as well as the one at household level. The people that participated in the activity of planting through Cast for Work, we seen improved household livelihoods where they were able to acquire also assets from the money that they worked for. What is next for us in the planning is to continue with the monitoring of the trees that have been planted, seeing their growth, then also promoting the indigenous trees. We've seen that most of the fruits that we planted has been growing well because they are locally sourced and they adapt very well to the environment. And as we are intervening, we only did this in one settlement within one zone within the settlement, and we are looking at scaling up to other parts of the settlement. And this calls for more funds because it takes money or fund to do this activity, and we are constrained with fundings. We've seen that mainstreaming agroforestry is key, and we want to make it part of our resilience strategies into our humanitarian setting, as most of the support that comes with the humanitarian it's short-lived, and yet in a long run, the effect is seen to last in the community. So we are looking at mainstreaming. As we conclude with our presentation, there are some key take-home, key lessons that I'm going to go through. Next slide, please. The key takeaway from our intervention is we've seen that there is a high demand for both fruits at household or community level, and wood species, as we've seen, they use them as they're pruning them for cooking within the homestead, and the engagement of the children in the tree planting, it seems to be more sustaining. As they learn from school, they take back the planting to their homestead, and they are the future generation to come. And if this information is instilled in them from early stage, it is more sustaining. And then lastly, community ownership is one key thing that we've seen where we planted the woodlots and even the one at household level, because we initiated the project together with them. They contributed in identification of the problem from the onset, making the stewardship and ownership of the initiative to be more sustaining. This is all what I have for you for now, and I've been seeing questions flowing, and I'd like to take this time to thank you for listening to me. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for your interesting presentation. I see there are also questions for you in the chat. And because again, for time constraints, we don't have time for them, but maybe you can respond to them in the chat to the interested persons. So now we have heard 4 presentations, and it's time to move on to our discussion part with our panelists. And I would like to open this discussion with a question to Ali. You have not been speaking yet, and we would like to ask you from the donor perspective, how could we integrate nature-based solutions into humanitarian project budgets? Because it's often short project timeframes and limited mandates. So what do donors in general look for when funding for nature-based solutions, especially in humanitarian settings? How could NGOs make their proposals compelling?
Yeah, hello everybody. That's of course a big question, especially in the times where we are living now, with humanitarian needs that have gone up. But I'd say the picture is not that bleak. I mean, we've heard something about the Need Plus tool. This is something we have also supported the development with the Joint Environment Unit to NEPOCHA. We have heard the land management, environmental land management in Cox's Bazar. This is a setting where we as SDC have also supported nearly since the beginning work in that direction. We had a secondment there with Karl Friedrich Glombiza in 2020-21. So yes, it's on the agenda also. You can see that also in donors signing the Climate and Environment Charter for Humanitarian Organizations, which is not that much about building nature capital in humanitarian setting. It's more about the mainstreaming, about our impacts of our action on the environment. But anyway, it goes also in the right direction. And as the donors know that humanitarian settings are there mostly for the long run, 20 years, 30 years. I mean, when the Rohingya came into Cox's Bazar from Bangladesh, we all knew this is something for years to come and probably decades to come, that there's no way they're going back in the next 2 years. There is an openness, but we have to be conscious of the hierarchy of objectives, of needs that we have, and also that the community has. So you can't come and say, okay, we're going to protect the trees, but the people have no food. Typical coping strategies when people cut trees to make charcoal, and then they have some revenue. I've seen that in Haiti, well, not a refugee setting, but plantations. Yes, then there came a drought, and all the plantations, they did not survive, not because they had no water, but because the people had cut them to make firewood, charcoal, and sell them to the Dominican Republic. In Cox's Bazar, it was even worse. People did not get fuel for cooking their meals. They got rice and so on, and they started, well, not only cutting the trees, but then digging out the roots of the trees, so you could not have any natural regeneration anymore, as Urs said. But coming back to your question, how to make the case, I think we need to have a clear purpose for what is proposed as nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions for what? In the case of Bangladesh, this was quite clear. This is a broad objective: land management. We need to have corridors for water, for nature, for roads, and we need to think of how we use the land also for recreation. We saw that. But then it can be for heat management. But if your objective is heat management, then it's probably not the only solution. I mean, in Cox's Bazar, typically the growing vegetables, and then you have the vegetations on the roofs. That's great against heat, but then you also have to think about corridors inside the camp where the air can circulate and reduce that heat. So you have to have a logic of objectives, because nature-based solutions per se, as the word says, it's a solution, not a particular response, or not a response to a particular solution. It can be the basis of future life. Protection of natural resources as that basis of life, like we saw in Chad, protecting the little biosphere that is there, protecting the soils against erosion. Otherwise, the crisis will get worse in the future. This is something that the donors agree to invest a part of their resources. I would say a little part, because the big part is going to immediate needs, urgent needs. But there is this aperture to invest in preventing something far greater problems in the future. 30 years ago, 30 years ago, we said we want to invest in DRR, in preventing or prevention mitigation of disaster risks before they are happening. So this is the same attitude that we need now for degrading environments and our degrading planet, and this can go all the way to reducing carbon footprint with carbon capture. But you have to make a case, and it will often depend on the donors' windows for funding, and maybe even the people that are in charge of a certain geographical or funding window. So, but then those people will once you have defined your objectives and you're clear about that, and you can fit into the donor strategy what they want to see to fund as objectives, because they think they have an added value there as this particular donor. Then, of course, you have to go into sustainability of what you're proposing. It has to be adapted. So you have to understand the system you are interacting with, the socio-natural system, the space, do you have access to the land? What are the rights of property to the land? What are the laws, legal frame? Does it allow you or not? What will be the interactions between the different social groups and the solutions that you present there? So you have to have a good understanding there, so that you don't run into problems, that it's not coming up as you would like. And then, of course, it has to be sustainable in the longer run. This means somehow you may need a business case there. It could be the committees that themselves are doing the management and investing some resources, or using people to do some work to maintain and preserve, or the resources pay for themselves, as was the case, the idea in the case of Chad. And then you'll want some tested solutions if possible. Species that are adapted, or things that work for, if it's say land erosion or landslides, then you want to stabilize that with roots. Vetiver, for example, will stabilize a shallow landslides, but it will not go very far. So you need the roots of trees to go further into the soil. But then if you have a landslide of more than 10 meters deep, then the roots will not do anything. So that's the part. Is it tested? Can we rely on it? Sometimes donors have appetite for innovation, and then they say, okay, we want to innovate, maybe not in the technological part, but then in an upscaling mechanism, if they have if they can get the impression that this can lead to huge replication in a setting, then that is in initial investment that has not so good cost benefit in the beginning. We can hope that it will get far better going down the road. So this is how a way that we need to sell it. Yeah, I would say you need the localization is also on the forefront now more and more. You need to have, well, the buy-in, of course, from the communities, the acceptance for it, to develop the solutions jointly, but then also to implement it as locally as possible, with giving the power to implement to local, maybe community-based organizations. Yeah, I think I stop there for now.
Thank you, Ali, for this very good answer. I think it has enlightened our audience quite a bit. And then I would like to keep on talking about what you said, that if we want to implement nature-based solutions, there have to be clear objectives, as in what problems they are solving. There needs to be understanding of the situation where they are being, and also having tested solutions that are for sure bringing some benefits. And then I would like to address or give the floor to Esanul. and ask about the evidence you have collected in your projects to demonstrate the impact of the nature-based solutions and that they are working. What kind of evidence have you collected, and has this helped not only in convincing donors, but also in engaging the communities and also keeping up the solutions sustainably in the long term?
Thank you, Maria. And very good question. So when it is about evidence collection, I would also like to go a little back. I mean, not that always evidence should be collected from the ongoing project. Like for our case, the project that we call SULMAR, Sustainable Land Management and Environmental Rehabilitation, it was built on learning from another project, where we also established walkway, which connected few learning centers, administrative centers, LPG, liquid petroleum gas distribution center, food distribution centers, and also, I mean, protected the bank, stream bank with grass. So this is from the same camp setting, same area. So people interact with them, and they also had the chance to share the learning with other people from other areas. Like for this specific site, when we went there and we engaging the community, we assessed the problem. I mean, we found a list of problems. And when problem prioritization was there, I mean, from the topmost one, which is owned by the most of them, which is about flood. So that we selected, I mean, all together. And later we have learned that, I mean, when a problem is owned by the community, then it increases the likelihood of, I mean, success of better engagement of the community. So evidence from that side. And I also shared during my presentation that in humanitarian setting or displacement setting, there are all those dynamics and challenges. Like even for nature-based solutions to be implemented, it requires some space, which for our case in Cox's Bazar, it was really difficult to find space in such congested area. So some people had to relocate it from the basin for the stream to be re-excavated and I mean the walkway to be established. But when we, I mean, several times organized this messaging and awareness session, also organized few go and see visit. Like we offered them that if you are relocated to the flood-free zone, these are the facilities that you will be having. So it was one informed decision by themselves. And later, at some point of the implementation or the project, I mean, infrastructure establishment and all those, when it was done, we also went back to those refugees who are relocated, and they said that we are happy that we are now in a flood-free zone. And then they also shared with us that those who are near to the stream now, they can access the space for vegetable cultivation. We appreciate that. We know that we can't enjoy that, but we are also in a flood-free zone. And when community realizes that, one also, I mean, share with others, that helped us. That in later part of the project, we found that, I mean, pushback or resistance are less than it was in the beginning. And that's one thing. And about the trust building, which is also very important. I mean, clarity in communication. And I mean, also sharing the common goal, how different part of the community will be benefited. When it was clearly communicated, we have found that that helped us a lot. So let me stop here.
Thank you a lot, Esanul, for these very concrete examples and great explanations that you made. I would now like to ask a question to Daniel. And what would be interesting for me to know more about is you clearly had let's say a humanitarian project, and you did your need plus assessment or needs assessment, and you found out, okay, we have to have an environmental component on top of on that project, and you came up with that tree planting initiative, and your program has a very strong focus on agroecology. You have a separate project on indigenous seeds in another region. And then you came up with the tree planting initiative, and the demand from the local authorities and also the communities was clearly need something that is fast growing. We need a quick energy supply, so this is TEEP. And maybe from a biodiversity conservational perspective, you would say, maybe that's not this solution, but we're now in this humanitarian context with these constraints. So there are these trade-offs. What kind of recommendations would you give to projects planning something similar and facing similar constraints? How to deal with these trade-offs and potential tensions between the community needs and maybe ecological priorities, biodiversity priorities?
Yes, thanks, Arabella, for your question. Normally, as you do community work, the aspect that deals with the local knowledge, I would begin from this aspect, as we trying to trade off between the biodiversity and using the local knowledge that you have within the community. For ownership, normally it's good for us to get the buy-in from the community as we try to improve and bring in the new initiatives that we think it is better, and they need to get it. At the beginning of the project, as you mentioned, we engaged the community in a consultative meeting using the NEET plus tool to gather the information to get to understand the areas that are having risk and how to go about the risk. And the information or the report came out after our consultative meeting of those species to be planted. One, why the species was picked. It was on the adaptability, putting in mind that Naki Valley, when it comes to the rain pattern, it receives little rain. There are other species that have been planted, but their survival and adaptation to the area has been very low. But of course, moving on with the project, we had to integrate the aspect of the agroforest, whereby we made them we distributed the land that has been planted with trees to them to do the farming, while also protecting the trees that are growing. So in a way, we were able to make them understand both the benefit of the tree planting as well as also doing their other own farming. And the buy-in came in. And that's why we've seen the one at the community level, the trees were able to grow. Though we still just, I would say 2 years, and there are some of the challenges that we are also facing from some areas when it comes to the protection of the trees, because the settlement is majorly southwestern part of Uganda. They do a lot of grazing, they're cattle grazers. So there are people that comes from the host community that are also sometimes encroaching on these areas for grazing, but due to community engagement, and also the partners around, the local partners engaging with the community on some of the disadvantage of their actions, we are able to get the buy-in from the community. That's why when we move around the community and the report that came from our partner, we're able to see that there's high demand for the trees from the community.
Thank you a lot, Daniel. So building on local knowledge to also to get the buy-in from the communities. Thanks a lot for these explanations. And there's a question for you, Urs, regarding the turnover of staff supervising assisted natural regeneration. Why not work more on strengthening local stakeholders in an effort to strengthen not only community engagement, but also in an exit process in order to ensure sustainability even after the end of the project? Would you like to take on this question, Urs?
Yes, I think this is a very important question. And of course, as I said, you know, the locals, the commitment and engagement of the local is key. Otherwise, it will not work. And also, what we have done, or what was in the field, there were environmental committees, displaced people, refugees, and local people were in this committee. And they, of course, they assisted all the work which had been done for the assisted natural regeneration. And so there was a hope, there was a sustainability. And it was also at the local NGOs who were participating, they were also more stable. So there, the situation was better. But it was at the SDC side, UNHCR side, there was the problem, you know. We hoped also, you know, to scale up it, not only, maybe even elsewhere in the Sahel, not only in Chad. And what we also tried, and for the scaling up, it is very important to involve the national authorities, the local authorities. And this was a challenge in Chad because, you know, the government is quite centralized, and in the ministries, and there are few technicians in the field, but we tried our level best to involve them. And because they have, when we are talking about sustainability, we cannot reach sustainability beyond the project cycle if it is not embedded really in the local communities and the refugees. And also what we forget, and I think sometimes, you know, we are not working enough together with the national authorities, because they have to take the handover, even if it's very complicated to go to the ministries. And I think we know all these challenges, but we have to involve them. And also what we tried in Chad, but for other reason it doesn't happen. We wanted to organize a national forum on the question natural regeneration versus tree plantation. And unfortunately, we couldn't manage to organize it, because this forum would be also could be also a good instrument for inviting you know, the neighboring country. Saying this, for example, Niger is quite advanced in natural regeneration. I don't know if you even know it. They managed, you know, with farmer managed natural regeneration. They really managed to change the landscape of southern Niger. And they started in the 80s, and you can even see it if you go to satellite images. You see there's a change in the landscape. So we wanted to involve also these actors, which had probably which had more experience than we, also in view of scaling up. But scaling up, yeah, it's a huge challenge. Again, I say the locals and the refugees has been committed. And also we don't have to forget the state when we're coming up to to the question of scaling up. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having the buy-in, as we said before, from the local communities, displaced people, but as important to have it from the public authorities. Handing over to you, Maria.
Yeah, there is even a question in the chat, indeed, about involving local and public actors. I would like to address Ali. You have experience with many projects, and maybe from your experience, you would like to respond to the question of involving local public actors and private sectors involved for sound sustainability and scale of the projects.
Yeah, I mean, this is always in development cooperation in general. This is a principle of having our partner countries grow. We just support them and their state apparatus with the support of their civil society, with the private sector, are in charge of their development. But things change, obviously, in purely, I would say, humanitarian settings where the state presence has diminished in fragile contexts where the state is diminishing. Look, in some countries we have, I'm thinking now of Central America. There we did a good work with the government and them taking on disaster risk reduction, also with nature-based solutions, having that integrated in universities. So that's kind of the normal development pattern, what you would expect a country to do. In Haiti, we failed with that theme. I mean, we thought we would support governance for disaster risk reduction, including nature-based solutions, but also technological solutions, and all this based off understanding the hazards. So we trained national professionals in organizations to do the hazard mapping and propose solutions, have that inserted in a university. But then we witnessed that this fragilization and the national government organizations losing control, losing the links with the local governments. So what we do there is to go to the local level, and the more you go to the local level, obviously the needs become global. You can't work in a sectoral way. You have to respond to communities, or at least to local governments' needs. And now we are launching a new project in the south of Haiti, and then it's an integration of WASH, natural resource management, and preparedness for disaster. I mean, rather short-term objectives combined with elements of longer resilience by building. And then you asked about the private sector. This is something that is not so easy. It depends on how you define it. But what is sure, philanthropy is clearly an important humanitarian donor nowadays, and we have to take alliance with them. But the typical engagement where we have common goals with the private sector and finance something together, this is far more difficult to establish.
Thanks a lot, Ali, for bringing in here the very important, very timely donor perspective to this discussion. And we have to slowly round up our general discussion we had today. A big thank you to all our speakers for the very useful insights you shared with us today. A big thank you to the whole audience, for everybody participating and for your active engagement in this discussion. Briefly summarizing what my key takeaway points. Several times, whether it was from Cox's Bazar, Chad, or Uganda, we were hearing if benefits are visible, if livelihood benefits are generated, then the interventions were more easily implemented, have a more sustainable outlook. And I think we learned a lot about the donor perspective on that. So let's keep in mind, we have to be clear on for what do we want to make a case. So nature-based solutions for what? And then let's make sure we are able to line out our sustainability strategy, and that we know the governance setting that we are working in. So we have a clear logic of objectives, and hopefully like this are able to integrate nature-based solutions more strongly into humanitarian or displacement contexts with tested, proven solutions. Or maybe let's keep in mind sometimes donors may have appetite for innovation, so let's also try to work on that. And I would like to end this session today with a little bit of an outlook that we have for the coming hours. So this was the launch of this year's annual learning days of the Swiss NGO DR platform. This afternoon, we will continue with our basically the introduction webinar. This is the webinar if you have questions on what are nature-based solutions really, how do we define it, what are controversial discussions around the whole topic this afternoon. And we have the session again tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. And then we have tomorrow also a session on implementing nature-based solutions with academic insight. This is going to be very interesting, in particular if you're interested in a little bit of the research perspective. And on Thursday also we have a webinar on valuing nature-based solutions, looking at the benefits, costs, for different dimensions. We will present the guide that the Swiss NGO DR platform has developed. So we are very much looking forward to having you join our additional sessions. And with that, a big shout out again to all our speakers, to the audience, and also to our translator, Yvonne. Thank you a lot, everybody, and Antonio, of course, for the great technical facilitation. I wish every one of you a good continuation of the day. Thank you a lot. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.